and welcome to the Elevate B2B podcast. This is a show where we have conversations that inform, include, and inspire the best in B2B marketing. I'm your host, Lee Oden, CEO of TopRank Marketing, and today we're talking with the undisputed queen of content and B2B marketing, an incredible storyteller and sought after keynote speaker, Wordle ninja, and Wall Street Journal best-selling author of multiple books with a completely revised and expanded edition of Everybody Writes that's going to be coming out soon, sometime in October. And of course, I'm talking about my good friend, Chief Content Officer of MarketingProfs, Ann Handley. Hi, Ann.
Thank you so much for that generous introduction. Yeah, I've never been described.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. I've never been described as a Wordle aficionado, but it's not true. So there we go.
Well, passionate. She's a passionate Wordle player who shares on Twitter about her Wordleness.
Yeah, competitive. I want to do competitive Wordle. I just want to do extreme Wordle sports. That should be a thing. Your son's super into. Yeah, your son's super into rugby, right? They should get into competitive Wordling with me. We'll just let's go.
I want to see what a lined out or a scrum looks like in Wordle. Okay. So I want to thank you for taking the time. Congrats on the new edition of Everybody Writes.
Thank you.
And especially thank you for helping us launch the all new Elevate B2B podcast.
Yeah, I'm honored. I'm honored to be the
excited.
guest number one. That's such an honor.
You are the most important. Absolutely. So for those tuning in for the first time to Elevate B2B, the purpose of this podcast is to focus on lifting up those in the B2B marketing world that are both creating impact and making a difference in our industry. And we're committed to telling stories that are, optimistic, ambitious, and authentic, with the goal of being equal parts informative and inspiring. So let's get started. Now, Ann, the past few years, I think you'll agree, have been quite a ride for businesses and marketers alike. And while a lot of B2B brands have, transformed, pivoted, adapted, and everything, the new normal doesn't really feel so normal yet. I'm curious what you feel some of the big challenges are that B2B marketers are still facing.
Yeah, it's a good question, Lee. First of all, I would agree with you that the new normal doesn't feel quite normal yet, which is a little surprising to me, and maybe it's surprising to you too. But, you and I have been crossing paths at a few key events this fall, back out on the speaking circuit, back at events. And while the events are happening, the people who show up to them are a little different now. I mean, there's some OGs like you and me and some of our friends. But I think the attendees are very often people that I didn't use or that I haven't met before, that I haven't seen at these events before, which is a little surprising to me. And I also know, both from an organization standpoint as well as an attendee and speaker standpoint, that filling the rooms is, definitely more challenging in 2022 than it was in 2019, pre-pandemic. And so, I think the new normal is not it. Well, I guess normal is not back. There is some new normal that's happening, but I'm not quite sure what that is. Planes are full, and it seems like stadiums are full and people are going to concerts, but it doesn't seem to be so true on the business to business side of things, that events are actually back up to where they were in terms of attendees and in 2019. So that's interesting to me. And so I do think that that plays into the challenges that we see in B2B marketing now, especially in a world where, in 2019, so many of our programs were based around live events, whether that was actually meeting people face-to-face as speakers, as sponsors, even as attendees. So a lot of that interaction, in 2020 went online, and I think it's still there for the most part, even though events are happening. And we are starting to see, some interaction happening face to face. There's still a whole lot that's happening online. And every year, sorry, go ahead. Okay, I'm just going to keep talking then, because I just want to share one more thought with you. Every year, MarketingProfs and the Content Marketing Institute partner on a content marketing study, and the new research is just came out. I just saw a draft of it this week. So I'll give you a little bit of a sneak peek, a little bit of an advance. One of the questions that we ask every year is how important is content to your B2B marketing strategy in any given year? And the most recent survey shows, right? The most recent survey shows that 71% of B2B marketers say it's even more important this year than it was the previous year. About 25% say that it was the same, and just 4% say that it's less important. So that to me is it just speaks to the need for the need for better content, for using content more strategically, because again, in this broader context of fewer live events, we have to figure out what do these online interactions look like and how do they actually drive business for our organizations. And now I'll shut up.
No, it's all good. That's great. What I was going to say is also about research. I think it was McKinsey that looked at go-to-market models that changed due to the pandemic have been found to be just as or more effective. And so companies are sticking with those digitally focused sorts of things. So it's, the new normal is not what 2019 was. It's very different, but we're still trying to figure it out, right? We're still trying to figure it out in so many ways. One of our themes going into 2023 for our company is to help marketers break free of B2B mediocrity by elevating the content experience. Now, I know you've been on a mission to stamp out mediocrity in content for a long time. What do you think, or why do you think so many B2B companies persist with what I like to call boring to boring when it comes to content?
Yeah, it's a little heartbreaking, isn't it? Just sort of it hurts my heart a little bit when I think about boring to boring. I think there's a lot of institutional bias that somehow business to business is less trendy, it's less glamorous, it can be less up to date. And I think the way that translates into the day-to-day work is that we don't always lead with things that I think we need to lead with, which would include experience, as you said, certainly storytelling and craft in the content that we're producing. Our friends at LinkedIn did a bit of research, I think it was last year, which actually is included in the brand new edition of my book, which showed the importance of creativity in B2B marketing. That it can be, I think the stat is 10 to 20 times more effective if we do things like tell stories, think about the craft, think about connecting emotionally. But yet, I think there's an institutional bias that we don't necessarily embrace that, as part of the campaigns that we are running in B2B marketing. And certainly, that's been a focus of my entire career, I'd say in the past decade anyway, is to try to bring B2B marketers along. But it's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of status quo out there. And I guess that's part of our mission here with Elevate B2B Podcast is to elevate, the practice and craft maybe a little bit by having folks like yourself share insights and perspectives.
Yeah, right. Because that's the thing. I have been in B2B marketing for 1,000 years, give or take, right? It feels that way sometimes. If every internet year is worth a dog year, 7 years is how I measure it, then yeah, it's been literally decades. I should be in a walker right now. I should be hello, Lee, how's it going? We should be passing in the hallway at the nursing home, just hey. But I think that, but in my decades of work in B2B marketing, I have never met a rational B2B buyer. That's the truth. We are completely irrational creatures. And the reason why we pick one solution or tool over another tool or solution is usually because of some weird emotional trigger. And so I think the more that we can be aware of that, create an awareness around it. And then secondly, the more that we can truly, step into that and use stories and think about the experience that we're delivering to our customers. That to me is really where we need to lead the industry toward. And I think there's all kinds of data out there that backs us up. But again, I think sometimes it does feel like, we're pushing against the status quo.
So my next question is you started to answer it a little bit. I mean, it's about, we've always had the belief that content doesn't need to just inform people. It's got to help them feel something. So obviously you're on, you believe the same, that content that has an emotional appeal or that does have an emotional affect is important, right? It does play a role in the B2B space. It's not just about specs and facts and features and that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of renewed interest in brand marketing in B2B. Again, something that the LinkedIn Marketing Institute has really spent a lot of time talking about and researching and thinking about and evangelizing, because I do think that brand in B2B is equally as important. I think for the past several years, I mean, maybe even decade or so, we've been really optimizing for more about like, let's optimize for leads, let's optimize for, all the ways that we can more easily measure B2B marketing. But I think ignoring your brand is equally important. It's a slower trajectory, but I think it's really important to, as a B2B company, to focus not just on, the leads that you're generating, but also your brand, the story that you're telling, and how your audience is thinking of you versus a competitor.
Have you ever experienced content from a B2B company that really connected with you on an emotional level?
Yes, 100%. Let me think about a couple. All right, actually, so one of my favorite examples is Tenant. Tenant is right there in Minneapolis, where you are right now, and Tenant sells. Part of what they sell in their portfolio are floor cleaning tools, floor cleaning equipment. I think of them as like a ride-on lawnmower, but for floor cleaners in industrial or in corporate situations. So one of them might be, like they sell to shopping malls, they sell to schools, they sell to manufacturers, like anybody who really needs, has a lot of space and they need to clean the floor. And so one of the ways that Tenant tells their story, or one of the ways that they market their floor cleaning machines, which again, they're the size of ride-on lawnmowers, are through an annual program that they host called Thank a Custodian. And I love that so much because for a couple of levels, but number one, because they aren't necessarily selling these machines to custodians, right? Custodians do not have a massive budget to buy these floor cleaning machines. Instead, it's the superintendents of schools or the superintendents of institutions who have the budgets, right? So the way that this program works is that they reach out to schools and institutions and they ask them to nominate the custodians at their facilities. Now, why do they do that? It's because, especially in an educational situation, like in a school or elementary schools in particular, everybody knows the custodian, like my kids, when they were in grade school, my son Evan in particular used to come home and tell me like what Charlie, the custodian, had been doing that day. He's like, did you know that he comes into the classroom and there's a secret panel in the ceiling and he can change a light bulb? I mean, that's very much Evan's point of view, but it's like he knew Charlie and Charlie was known to all the kids. And so the Tenant program recognizes the end users of their product. The people who nominate them, of course, are the superintendents, the teachers, the people who in part influence the buying decision or who actually have the budgets. So school custodians who report into procurement, who make those requests from procurement at municipalities. And so what I love about it is it's very much highlighting the underdog, I guess, the unknown end user, but also making their product really relevant to the people who actually do the buying. And this program has been going on for a couple of years. And even during COVID, when schools were shut down, some of them were shut down, for the better part of a year, that they pivoted it slightly to talk about institutional cleanliness, like making sure the floors are clean and all of that kind of stuff. And so I think it's a great example of telling us a bit of a story about the people who use the products, but in the end, like when I look at the winners every single year, like I'm not even in this business. Like, obviously I'm not going to buy one of their machines to clean my tiny house studio back here. But it's when I see the people who win the winners get a $5,000 check, and then their school also gets a $5,000 check for a program of their choosing.
Cool.
So when I see the faces of these people holding like the giant checks and like the beaming, and I read the stories of the custodians who are part of those school communities, like it's just such a beautiful moment, and maybe part of it is because, I remember the custodians from my own kids, like when they were small. So yeah, that's just one example of a company who has truly told an emotional story, I think. I'd
That's
also say
great.
Another one is like Google excels at this, by the way, like all of their products, they just kill. But I don't want to talk about Google because I feel like, it's like going to a coffee conference and talking about Starbucks, or, going to a rocket conference and talking about Elon Musk. It's like, yeah, of course. But at the same time, they do a very good job with making their technology very human centric.
Yeah. Well, so you picked up on you've focused on two things. So the storytelling aspect of it and the humanization, humanize that B2B brand and to do it through storytelling. And that's what helps you feel, right? Awesome examples. Ann, I checked, and 78% of people that share your content on Twitter and social media, they use the word love right next to it. I kind of made that up, but it's a very high number.
I love it. Yeah.
So as someone whose content is beloved by many, from whether it's your keynote presentations or that amazing newsletter that you publish, what do you think it takes to create content that people really love?
I think it relates to all the things that we've been talking about here, Lee. To me, it's finding a good story as the hook. So coming up with a story that will extend a metaphor, that will really bring home an idea or a solution or a concept and make it really accessible in very simple human terms. That's essentially all I do. I mean, that's really my core skill in my speeches and my books and my newsletter, in any kind of writing that I do. I always try to start with a story and make it as accessible and relevant as I can. And my biggest bit of feedback that I get, especially in my email newsletter, because it's there's always an easy trigger to share your feedback with me. And the biggest bit of feedback I get is always that they see themselves in what I'm writing about, which is funny because, there are 50,000 people on my list. Like, how is it that 50,000 people will see themselves in what I write? And the answer to that is because it's the more specific you make your story, the more universally it'll appeal, because you are ultimately sharing a fundamental human ideal or emotion, right? And so the trick is to tell a story that's ostensibly about you or an experience that you had or something that you observed or felt or were part of, but at the same time, not make it to pull out the emotional and the human elements of that to make it more universally appealing. So that's essentially what I do. So even if it's a story about me, it's never really about me. It's about how we react as a human race, like as we react as people. And I'll just share one of my little tricks that I do all the time in my writing is that I will start talking about me. I don't know, my famous story about Bun the Rapid and my attempt to convert him, right, by feeding him a carrot. Some of you might know that story.
That was so awesome.
Yeah. And so it was my whole effort over the course of a summer to try to convert this rabbit to a customer by feeding him from my own hand. And so what happens in that story is that I start out talking about me, and I eventually start, instead of saying me and I say we or you. And it's just a simple thing, but you'll notice this, a lot of writers will do this. they will share an anecdote or a story that starts with I, and then by the third or fourth paragraph, it's suddenly flipped, and it's you, and it's we, and it's much more inclusive. So the reason why I'm sharing that is because I do think it's an effective little tool, a little trick that you can do in your own writing, and in your own storytelling from stage. On stage, I never say, you should do this. I say, we should do this. I try to be affiliative as much as possible because, again, that's the key to making it universally relevant. It's not about me. It's about us.
That's perfect. That's awesome. Speaking of, you're kind of touching on inclusiveness through the language that you use. And I wanted to ask you about DE&I as it relates to marketing. So, DE&I efforts are increasingly part of marketing conversations at companies as they launch initiatives and, kind of go beyond virtue signaling and all that. And I think we both can agree that there's a lot more progress that can be made. So besides being the right thing to do, it's also good for business as B2B, LinkedIn's B2B Institute has done revealed in some of their research. So my question for you, with all that as context, is what do you think, what would you like to see more of? I guess, there's signs of progress, but what would you like to see more of from B2B brands as it relates to DE&I?
Yeah. It's funny because, one of the new sections of my last book, of the new edition of Everybody Writes, which is right here, by the way. I realized I really should have shown this at the beginning. Sometimes I am truly a terrible marketer. I just really am. Anyway, So one of the new sections is an entire new section about whether marketers should speak out about social issues or causes, and if so, in what way should they show up? So yes, I guess the first thing that I would say is that I am so happy that we are talking about it at all, right? Because it's like, God, we should have been having these conversations, a decade or more ago. So I am completely happy that we are talking about it now. And the other thing that I would say is that we in marketing, we have enormous power, I think, to switch people's perceptions. And so people who say there's no reason why marketing has to be part of this or whether business should be part of this whole conversation. I 100% could not disagree more. Could not disagree. I actually, no, 100% disagree. That's what I wanted to say. And so there are double negatives. They kill you, man, every single time. Anyway, I absolutely think that we should be part of this conversation. And more than that I think we have a responsibility and an imperative to do so. So in terms of what could we be doing more of? I think making sure that when we are participating in, diversity and inclusion conversations, that it is not just, as I write about in the book, performative allyship, that we're not just sort of checking a box and being like, well, we had a Black person on our Instagram last week, so therefore check, it's not about that. It's actually about really embracing it on behalf of the organization. And again, I think marketing has an important role in this, but it really means also that we have these conversations with our leadership team and that we talk about how important it is internally. So I think that's the first thing. And the second thing is, and this is just on a personal level, look around the room. I do this all the time, when you and I have been at some of the same events together over the past couple of weeks. And I have very, very much been doing that there, looking around the room, seeing who's there and seeing who's not, and then asking myself, what can I do to change this? One of the things that I've tried to do is bring more speakers of color to the MarketingProfs stage, and also create relationships with speakers of color or marketers of color, so that I can be a resource or a mentor to them. And so as much as we talk about things from a corporate level and an organizational level, I also think it's important from a personal level to reach out to those around you, look around the room, ask who's there and who isn't. And to the people who are not there, how can I get more of those people on stages? How can I bring more of them with me into the room? I'm really aware of the fact that I have been in this industry for, again, 1,000 or so years. And very often, there aren't even other women on stages. And so there's a couple of women that I keep under my wings that I try to promote and I try to help. I think that, my role, could I do more? Yes. And I'm very aware of that and trying to do better at it all the time. Because I think that it's my responsibility to acknowledge that and figure out how I can help too.
Marketing often gets called out for not exactly being straightforward or real, with audiences. And I think people are really craving authenticity, more authenticity from brands, even B2B companies. So what do you think B2B brands can do to be more authentic with their content?
In B2B marketing, I think that no one goes into B2B marketing thinking that we want to be inauthentic, right? It's like we don't go into these jobs thinking, oh, I can't wait to not be real, or I can't wait to not be human. Like, of course we don't think that way. Like I have to think that our impulse is that we want to be real and authentic and to show up in ways that will, connect at an emotional level to those around us. And so, I think one of the easiest things that we can do is just step into our roles as creators, as individuals who are part of a marketing team. And the way that I think about this, because I am a writer and because I write books about writing and how we can be stronger and more effective communicators, I think a big piece of that is thinking about our own brand voice and how we are embracing that as individuals. In the brand voice overall can be kind of confusing. I also hate the way that it feels a little bit like literary and inaccessible, but really all an authentic brand voice means is that we are showing up in a way that feels very genuine to the people who we want to communicate with. And so I think the more that B2B can really think about our brand voice and think about the people who are part of your marketing team who are creating content for you, and that includes people internally as well as externally. And, helping them tap into their own brand voices so that they can help us evolve and truly make our corporate brand voice, or our overall brand voice, something that's much more relatable and less stiff and buttoned up. I think of brand voice as kind of a continuum, and I'm going to talk about this next week at the B2B forum in Boston. On the one hand, you've got these crazy B2C brands like Duolingo, right? Who shows up on TikTok. Have you ever seen their TikTok channel on Duolingo?
I haven't. I've been TikToking just recently. I'm addicted now, but I haven't seen Duolingo yet.
I mean, Scrub Daddy would be another example. Like these brands, these B2C brands that show up and they're completely unhinged. And it's I think that's so fantastic from a B2C brand voice point of view. But then B2B can't be there. And then at the other end, we have brands that are completely unrecognizable from their brand voice. Like they just sound like anybody else. And so I think the trick for B2B, and again, I'm going to talk about this next week at the forum, is we're not unhinged, but that doesn't mean that we're unrecognizable either. So I think, we need to fall somewhere in the middle. And I think there are various ways that we can figure out who we are and then plot ourselves somewhere in the middle and to communicate in a way that's not just how every other brand communicates, but that actually feels, really, really authentic and genuine to us.
As we head into, from Q4 into the new year, what are you most excited about?
I'm really excited about this book. As you know, Lee, I went into this thinking that this was going to be just a quick rewrite, or not even a rewrite. I thought it was just going to be a quick dust off, just no sweat, no problem. I got this. I'd maybe update some examples. I'd freshen the pillows in the guest room and, spray some Febreze around and call it a day. And there we go, second edition. But the more that I started looking at the old version, which is still not to denigrate it. I mean, it's still a great book. The bones of it are still there, but I felt it was not doing it justice to just give it a quick like, quick dust off, that I felt like I needed to rewrite every single word. And maybe it's a little crazy, but it wasn't necessarily because I cared about the book so much. It's because I feel like that this is like, I'm not flattering myself, like this isn't a flex, but like this is the book around writing in marketing. And so I feel like I needed to honor writing's role in marketing and evolve it. And so the only way to do that was to really make this book not just like a second edition, but really newly relevant for 2022, 2023 and beyond. And so that's why I completely rewrote it. I was talking to a friend this morning and he said, I still don't understand why you didn't write an entirely new book. And that is exactly why. Like I kind of did write a completely new book with the similar structure to the old book. But the reason why is because I really want writing to be in craft and story, brand voice, all of the things that are in this new edition that weren't necessarily in the old edition. Like I want all of that to really be front and center in B2B marketing. And it's not right now, but we're getting closer. And I really wanted to be that champion. I want to see it happen.
Well, it sounds like a part of everyone listening in terms of what they can do to elevate their B2B marketing is to get a hold of that book. So I can't wait to get a hold of mine at B2B Forum next week. So here's a question I'm going to be asking every guest.
Yeah.
And that is, what brings you the most joy when it comes to marketing?
I love marketing, but what I love about it is that it's always changing. And I love the way that marketing is best when you approach it with a certain curiosity. So for example, you just said a few minutes ago that, you've been diving into TikTok. You wouldn't have said that 2 years ago, but because you are a curious marketer, you're like, I'm guessing that what is in Lee's brain is, could I use this for B2B marketing? And so there's a sense of curiosity. I think the smartest marketers and the most effective marketers ultimately look at new tools and new developments and new technologies and think, how can I use this? Like there's that sense of curiosity. It's very different than another part, than any other part of the company. Like, do you think that finance is sitting around thinking, oh, geez, I really would love to see like a new spreadsheet tool happen? Like, they're just not. Like, they don't, it just doesn't work that way. And so, marketing to me is the most creative piece of the organization. That's true, but at the same time, it's also the most curious. And that's really what I love about marketing, and just that piece, like that knowledge, just brings me such joy and just reminds me almost every single day that like I'm in the right place.
Awesome. So you mentioned B2B Forum. It's back in person, October 12th through 14th.
That's right.
In Boston.
Yep.
I'm wondering, will there be a marching band this year? Or will you be playing accordion?
There will be an oar
on stage, or guitar.
There will be an
special
oar.
Surprises.
There probably will be. Yeah, probably. Not so sure about a marching band, but there will be. You know me, Lee. Had to do something.
Yeah.
So
it's going
to be a good time.
I'll be there. I can't wait.
It's going to be fun.
It's going to be awesome.
No, it's going to be great.
All right.
And, yeah. Anyway, I thank you for being part of it. I always appreciate your support. And I think I know you are definitely one of the speakers who has spoken at the B2B Forum the longest. I mean, I want to say probably close to almost every single one. This is our 16th year.
Almost.
So.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
I'm telling you, 1,000 years old. Between the two of us, we're like 5,000 years old. It's insane.
Well, let's see. I guess I'm just going to leave that there.
All right.
I don't even. I want to thank you, Anne, for sharing your wisdom and insights. And I feel like we or you helped us elevate B2B, the craft, a little bit with some great insights, especially about storytelling and the role of emotion as it relates to marketing, being more inclusive. What do you think?
100%. Yes. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
It's been such a nice time.
Yeah.
So always good to chat with you, but especially in this.
The Elevate B2B Marketing podcast is brought to you by the team at TopRank Marketing, where we help enterprise B2B technology companies get more customers through content, search, and influencer marketing. You can find more information about us at toprankmarketing.com. And be sure to subscribe to Elevate B2B Show, as we have an amazing roster of B2B marketing smarties scheduled, and you're not going to want to miss it. So thank you again, Ann. I really appreciate you spending the time, and I'm super excited to see you next week.
Yeah, same here.